so today we're going to start out by talking about creating a seamless pattern in Photopea. Now, does anybody know when I talk about a pattern in this term, what do I mean by a pattern? So sometimes a pattern means what we're cutting around, like you create a pattern that you're cutting out because you want to make multiples of that. Or a pattern can be a design that is repeated over and over again. So in our case, our pattern is a design that is repeated over and over again. So the pattern that I have on my screen right now is simply red circles on a white background. Okay? If I were asking you to create what you see on my screen in Photopea right now, what would you do? Or what questions would you ask if your goal was to just create what you see on my screen? Jacob? Okay, do we need a specific amount of dots was his question. Okay, good. Do they need to be symmetrical? So my answer to the symmetrical one would be yes. My answer to the specific amount of dots, I would probably say no. But they do need to be symmetrical, meaning they all need to be the same size, and they need to have equal spacing between each of them. Okay, so is that sounding like it's going to be fun to do? No, because we're going to have to use guidelines, we're going to have to use rulers, we're going to have to play with spacing to get all these. Now, something that you could do is you could start with these 3 and these 4. Then you could kind of group those together and copy and paste and count how far over you're going. Again, not that much fun. Now, let's think that this pattern is going to be on a box, on your package. And let's just say it's a simple box. My cube has 6 sides to it. If I really wanted this pattern on 6 sides, am I going to have to copy and paste it? Am I remaking it? Whatever the case may be, this just sounds like a lot of effort and work. So we are going to learn how to make a seamless pattern in Photopea. Now, I'm going to recommend that for the first time through today, we all just play with a circle because that's going to make it easiest to follow along. But then my goal is that before the end of the class period or your working at home session, you would do another shape or letter, maybe something that would be specific to your packaging. Now, I'm not saying that your packaging has to have a pattern. I'm just saying it's something you might do. So if you take a look in Google Classroom, I posted creating patterns in Photopea. There is a link already here that says packaging with patterns. All I did was a simple Google search for packaging with patterns. And well, you can see that was just a screenshot that I took, and they have quite a bit. Okay? All right, so in Photopea, now we are going to be working with pixels today and not inches. Now, I wish that I could sit here and very easily explain to you how big a pixel is, but it can be a little confusing. So it's much, much smaller than an inch. It is, I actually knew this. Now I got to Google it because I really do know. I've looked this up before. I use it sometimes in yearbook. It's really small. Slightly embarrassed that the graphic design teacher has to look this up because she should know it. But it's not something that I talk about common in class. Yeah. So a pixel, okay, so you can see this portion of an inch. Okay, but the reason we're going to use pixels instead of inches is because we don't, I mean, how many of you just love fractions and decimals? Come on, I mean, I do see one that's maybe thinking he likes fractions and decimals, and that's a good thing. But when we're talking about 0.0104 and getting what's called an offset correct, we want to work with pixels because we're going to look at pixels as whole numbers, okay? So we are going to start a new document. That new document is going to be called pattern. You are going to be working in pixels. And it's going to be 300 pixels by 300 pixels just with a white background. And then you can hit create. All right. Now, we are going to use our ellipse tool. So watch me for a second first. You're going to use your ellipse tool. You are not going to click and drag. We're accustomed to maybe clicking and dragging, or if we want that perfect circle, clicking and dragging and holding the shift key down. I want you to just click, and when you do that, I do want you to put a check mark where it says from center, and I want your ellipse to be 100 by 100, and this is in pixels. Now that should have been in the center. I don't like that. I know why it's not, but we'll get it there. So the goal really is for this ellipse to be in the center, and it wasn't. Because it's measuring that 100 by 100 from the center, and it's from a point. If you move this around, it will kind of snap to the center point. But again, that's trusting our eyeball, which is not always the best thing to do. If you go to view, you can go to show, and you can turn a grid on. And make sure that your snap to is turned on for guides and grid. And we're also going to turn rulers on. Now, what this will allow us to do, we know that this is 300, and I tried to pick easy numbers. If you come over here with your move tool, you can drag a guideline. What is half of 300? 150. So I can drag my guidelines, so they're at 150, and I have that grid, so I can truly make sure that my circle is centered. Okay, so I'm going to pause so students in the classroom can catch up. I probably did that a little on the quick side, and we'll be back. Depending on the type of pattern we wanted to create, if we were to go ahead and make this a pattern right now, it would work out. But depending on the shape that you're working with and the placement, and you want no seams, you need to have portions of your design in your corners. So we are going to learn how to do that. And I just think this is kind of pretty darn awesome. So we're going to take our shape 1, and we are going to duplicate it, and we are going to rasterize it. So go ahead and duplicate that shape and rasterize it. And right now we have 2 circles on top of each other. 2 circles on top of each other. Good? All right. Now you are going to go to Filter, Other, Offset. Filter, Other, Offset. And there are specific settings that we are going to put in. So we want our offset I did something wrong in my mathematical calculation here. $150, and I thought that was right, but it didn't seem to be working. $150 should work. And the undefined area should be wraparound. And does it take a quarter of each circle and put it in your corners? Wonderful. Okay, so this is your pattern. But Photopea doesn't know that yet. We have to define this as a pattern, okay, which is super easy. You're going to go to Edit, Define New, Pattern. And it just called it pattern. We would have to have given this document a different name, such as red dot or something, for it to have a name besides pattern. But for practice today, this is fine. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to go to File, New, and just this very first one that's under Social, it says Facebook page cover. Just go ahead and double-click Create New. You should have a giant white space there. And we are going to turn this giant white space in to all those crazy polka dots like I had here. Okay? If you would like, you can go ahead and turn your grid off here. You don't have to, but if you want to, you can. So go to View, Show, and Uncheck Guides if you don't want to see those. And it doesn't matter what color you pick, but take your paint bucket and fill the background with a color. Fill the background with a color. You cannot leave it white. Actually, you might be able to, but a color helps me know that I have something there. David, did you fill it with a color? All right, then you're going to double click so your layer styles come up. And you're going to go to Pattern Overlay. And now you can choose the pattern that you just made. You can choose the pattern. So double click to get into your effects. And go to Pattern Overlay. So double click right here. When you double click right here, your layer styles are going to come up. You have to click on Pattern Overlay, and then your pattern that you just made should be in there. And you can hit OK. And you should see circles everywhere, right? Was that easier than drawing all those circles? It may not have seemed like it as we were stepping through it, but if you were making a pattern that you were going to put on multiple documents and things like that in the long run, it would be simplistic. So I'm going to ask you to watch all this first, and then you guys can work on this. You're going to make another new document, pattern 2, 300 by 300, create. Your choice, what type of pattern you develop. This might be a pattern that could potentially be used for your packaging. This might be a pattern that you're just making to satisfy the requirement of today's lesson. So maybe I should have thought more about what I wanted my pattern to be. I want my pattern to be, I'm going to use a shape tool. Yes, Mrs. Martin should have thought more about what this pattern was going to be. I'm kind of frozen in time. Did I see a wrench? Oh, it's raining. It's going to be an umbrella. So I have this umbrella, and I'm going to put Martin inside of it. So maybe today I'm making packaging for umbrellas. I don't know what just happened there. I don't know. I really like yellow. It's kind of my favorite springtime color. So I think I'm going to switch this so it's yellow. I think I would like a different text, but I don't want to spend too long creating it. Some of these texts I don't like. I want it to be a little on the gray side. I want to put just a little bit of a stroke on my umbrella. All right, so I need to make